When we speak of India-Japan relations, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what my talk really is about, although I will pursue a very elliptical approach before I come to talk specifics about India and Japan. It's really all about environment. The fact is that we are dealing with a situation of, if one were to characterize it using one of those glib phrases, diffused polarity. It's about the global environment in which we find ourselves. And there is no question about the fact that the world, and Asia in particular, are passing through very complex times. The instability of the bipolar world was what an engineer would call predictive instability. It was something that you roughly knew the broad contours of, even though you were always surprised at when it presented itself in a specific way. But the former Soviet Union and the United States had a certain carve-up, a certain division, and there was a certain predictability to that. Today we have instability that is really quite unpredictable. And this is what renders it especially difficult for policymakers and for countries that are trying to chart a strategic course through these very choppy waters. Of course, you have a lot of local stories, and I think in Asia we should not neglect, when we talk of the changing Asian environment, we shouldn't neglect the rise of mid-level powers like Indonesia, like Vietnam, like Turkey, Iran, and I'm confining myself for the moment only to Asia, East and West. These are just 4 countries. Korea, if you have a situation of Korean reunification, again would significantly alter the strategic environment and map of Asia. Now, even though the share of the United States remains more or less constant, it is my sense that the ability for the US to translate its economic might into power at the global level will decline. And it is this reality of diffused polarity at one level and the conversion of the United States into a quasi-hegemonic power that has led to, these are the reasons why we see so many conflicts in Asia, either sharpening or either remaining unresolved or getting sharpened. And you have the Iran nuclear issue, where the United States, despite all the different measures it's taken, has not brought it necessarily any closer to a happy resolution the way it would like to see it. The DPRK situation in many ways has completely got out of hand in terms of the number of nuclear and missile tests they've conducted, in terms of the recent escalation of rhetoric that we see. Israel-Palestine remains a thorn in the flesh of West Asia and the world, instability in South China Seas, and the rise of new crises in Syria and elsewhere. All of this is testimony to the fact that there are real consequences to this diffusion of polarity that we see, and the inability of a former hegemonic power, or a power that still likes to believe it has hegemonic characteristics, to impose its will and bring about a new settlement. And it is my contention that any analysis of India's Asia policy, or indeed Japan's Asia policy, and any discussion of India-Japan bilateral relations would have to take into account this reality. We cannot wish it away, we cannot make assumptions that aren't correct. The world is exactly the way we see it today, and we have to find ways of dealing with it. I'm not sure if this is Thomas Friedman's theory that two countries that trade with each other may never, or invest in each other, may never go to war. Certainly, I mean, there's no question of a war, but if you look at the tension that prevails at various points of time between China and Japan, or China and many of its other important trading partners, it's clear that the level of economic interaction is no guarantee for a stable political relationship. And to the extent to which the Japanese feel pressure from the Chinese side, this acts as an inducement for the Japanese to reach out to like-minded countries, India being one of them. And I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of the long-term investment, political investment, and even economic investment that Japan is making in India is in part fueled by a latent insecurity about US intentions, long-term intentions in Asia, the consequences of a possible rise, less than peaceful rise of China. So Japan in its own way is reaching out, building its partnerships, hedging its bets. India is a beneficiary, and that's a good thing for us. On the negative side, of course, is that if this factor is overplayed, so if this is widely publicized and advertised and spoken about, that the main reason why Japan wants to have relations with India is to have a common cause against China, all of this has very negative consequences, and there's a great deal of aversion in Indian policy circles to this kind of a conception and this kind of talk. So in a way, this represents the plus and minus of Japan's wider policies in the region from an Indian point of view. In many ways, the question is, when we speak of a Troika, India, US, and China, who will be at the center of this Troika is really, really important. And I've done their little diagram. Now, I've put, because I'm Indian, I've put India in the middle, and the US and China. Now what this implies, and this is not my theory, I owe this thought to Kishore Mahbubani of Singapore, when he said that India should strive to have better relations with both China and the United States than China and the United States have with each other. The US policy in Asia is pivoted around the US being the balancer. And it presupposes, and in many ways encourages or even engenders insecurity, rivalry, imbalance, and distrust between the major countries of Asia. So the US would very much like India and China's relationship to be on a slightly uneven keel, with the balancing being given from outside by the United States. So that's a very nice position for the US to be in. And today, if you look at the Troika from an Indian point of view, actually, it is the US that should be in the triangle. That is doing the balancing, because notwithstanding any long-term rivalries, the extent of US-China communication and trade and interaction is much more than the extent of the India-US communication trade, even though at a cultural level or at a political level there's a greater comfort that India and the US have with each other. So maybe we need a more complicated three-dimensional kind of a diagram to capture the complexity of this kind of a balancing act. But for us, one of the key lessons is that it's important for India to be at the center of the India-China-US Troika. And I would say that even for Japan, if you're looking at the Japan-China-US Troika, and I'll come to this later, this may be a bit of a fantasy or wishful thinking, but Japan really should also not be looking, Japan should also be that country which can provide the sort of balance in the wider situation. It's important for both Japan and India to not treat their relations in Asia as a zero-sum game. India should not look at its relations with China as a derivative of US-China relations, nor should we look at our relations with Japan as a derivative of Japan-China relations. The more we do that, the greater is the danger that we will run into trouble, that the India-China relationship will be hostage to any improvements that may happen on the US-China front or the Japan-China front. So it's very important that we not look at these relations as a zero-sum game. And the second broad point or agenda point for India and Japan is that we both have to learn to live with the reality that there will be a slow build-up of US-China rivalry in the long run. And now we can either choose to encourage this rivalry, or to take advantage of it, or to somehow benefit from it, or we can work together to try to create the kind of security and economic architecture that Asia needs, which could mitigate and contain this rivalry. And I'm saying that more than, if you take a broader view, it's not just the rise of China that is the source of instability and uncertainty in Asia and the world. It's the response of the United States to the rise of China and the dynamic between these two countries that is likely to be the source of a lot of instability and tension in the years ahead. So maybe rather than encouraging or looking for ways to push this rivalry further and to take advantage of it, we need to work together to create the kind of architecture that can mitigate and contain this rivalry. This, in my opinion, is the containment that Asia badly needs, and it is as good a pivot as any to try to reimagine the India-Japan relationship. Thank you very much. The global rebalancing, the coordination of monetary policy, the coordination of ensuring that there's no protectionism. These are all very, very important initiatives that the G20 was able to take. To my mind, the G20, of course, continues to have a role, but the failure of the G20 to translate some of the important agenda items from Indian and Brazil and Chinese point of view of restructuring global financial institutions is leading many of us to look at other arrangements. So BRICS, IPSA, these kinds of fora, the less satisfaction that India and China and Brazil get at the G20 or other multilateral bodies, the more likely it's going to be that we will find ways to work with each other. On the problem of freedom of speech and political freedom, and you're right. I mean, I think the Chinese authorities use online expression as a safety valve to have the system let out steam. But I don't think we should pretend that the Chinese leadership has the ability to control that. And I do believe that a lot of the negative energy that we have seen on the India-China front, and I'm saying this as a journalist, has to do with a lot of irresponsible reporting and irresponsible commentary, both in the Chinese media and Chinese internet sites, as well as in the Indian media and Indian internet sites. I think we've already come to a day where the Chinese are not able to fully control what is said and transmitted on the internet. They try very hard, but those who want to have ways to use it. And sooner or later, the desire of Chinese to have more freedom of expression will probably assert itself in some way or the other. What kind of China that will produce is a different question altogether.